Now, let me introduce our wonderful guest. Tiphanie Yanique is the author of the award-winning novel Land of Love and Drowning, as well as the poetry collection Wife. She is the winner of the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize in 2014 and a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree. She has also received the Rona Jaffe Award and a Fulbright Scholarship. Her short fiction has been published in The New Yorker and anthologized in Best American Short Stories 2020. Originally from the Virgin Islands, she now lives in Atlanta, where she's professor at Emory University. And she's joined in conversation tonight with Brandon Taylor. Brandon is the author of the story collection Filthy Animals and the acclaimed novel Real Life, which has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize, longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and named a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice. Welcome to you both. Can't wait to hear what you say. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you to Ileana and to Akil and to Brandon and to everyone who's with us. Thanks for being here. Brandon, did you want to say anything? Do you want me to just make?
Oh, I thought you were just gonna hop on in and do a reading. Yeah, I can say some stuff. I mean, I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled to get to talk to you about this novel, Monster in the Middle. I have so many questions on how you made it, because it is just one of those books where you read it and you're like, how did she do this? This form, these voices, these characters, this structure, this incredible ode to love and its force. So I'm so honored to be here with you, and I can't wait to hear you read from it, and then we'll get into some hopefully interesting questions.
Brandon, thank you so much for doing this. I adore you so much. And I'm, again, really happy to be here on the Zoom with you guys. Thank goodness for technology. I was so much looking forward to seeing you guys in person, but I'm glad we're able to do it this way. I'm gonna read just a small passage from this new novel, Monster in the Middle. And I'm actually gonna read from the passage that's called Monster in the Middle. And smack in the middle of the book. So lots of middles. This is the story of Stella's dad. It's set in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. It's from a male voice, so you could just pretend like I'm a dude reading it. Listen, daughter, there is no way to know anything for sure, and thank God for that. Thank God for that New Year's Day, 1968, the day the monster was on my back. But then again, the monster has always been coming for me. I'm a warm-blooded person because of where my blood comes from, island blood. Thank God for that blood and for that island, but sweet Stella, I'd never been so cold. The monster was in the air. Maybe the monster was trying to nyam me, eat me, but there I was. I was the kind of boy, and I was still a boy, who would come to wear sweaters in the summers of South Carolina, let my mother kiss my forehead that morning, then climb aboard a plane. Nothing with me but a bag, one change of light clothes suitable for the West Indies, a toothbrush, a razor, that last because my mother had heard that there would be no one there who knew how to cut my black boy hair, though she hadn't thought about my needing a winter coat. And thank God for that long plane ride where I was too excited to be scared and so watched the sky. And for that long sleepless bus ride where my sudden fear kept me from rest. Thank God for this St. Thomas boy in a bus, me not sleeping, but looking out the window as it became winter before my eyes, cold monster. Did I clarify that it was New Year's Day? That the kiss was my mother's last? She was dying of cancer. You know that part already, right, sweet girl? Breast. Though no one but me and a doctor over in Puerto Rico knew. I wasn't allowed to tell a soul because sickness of the breast or the uterus or any part of the body we call private, the parts we use to love, the parts we use to make life, sickness in those parts was a shameful thing. And so I boarded that plane and climbed aboard that bus, maybe heading to my own death, not sure, but feeling also that I likely never see my mother again. But still, Thank God for the burn in my mother's breast before I left. Thank God for her kiss goodbye that let me know it was indeed goodbye. I could tell you more about my mother, your grandmother. I should. For even she is the monster and her mother too. I just want to explain how this goes. It's a journey, but you're not alone in it, my love. None of us is. You feel alone, but you also take the journey because you don't want the loneliness. Maybe people go off to war because they want to be left alone, but left alone and lonely, different things, those. Me, I didn't want either, baby. Just don't be confused by my life or all of these lives. It's easy really to understand. See, these lives are yours. Have I made it clear that I am so thankful? Thank God for my memories and thank God for the memories that made me. We can't outrun the monster. Run, monster. Girl, did they make us run that first night? The winter air like pins in my nostrils. I had a bloody nose before a mile, but kept running because the drill sergeant was shouting and because everyone else was running too, no matter that I was in short pants and air colder than I'd ever known. Thank God for the short pants. Thank God for the ash on my knees that looked like a disease. Thank you for the blood in my nose that busted out and coated my mouth and neck and shirt and scared the sergeants just enough. That night, I shivered so loudly that a bunkmate threw his blanket on me. Thank you, mate monster, generous monster, thank God. That extra blanket helped. I slept, but it started again and again. Every morning the blasted running, every night the cold and the sweating in the cold and the sweat freezing me and the letter in the mail before basic was even out telling me that my mother was dead. I'll stop there.
Oh my gosh. I think I could just listen to you read this whole book. We should just have that be the event. That would be amazing. What an incredible reading that was. That was amazing.
Brendan.
I guess my first question is maybe the most basic question of all, which is that, like, what was the first seed for this book? Because it is one of those books that has all these different lines and branches and lineages, and we cover decades and decades in various characters' lives. And just sort of looking at it from first glance, it has so many moving parts that I'd love to just hear a little bit about, like, where did it all start for you, this book?
My truest answer is I have no fucking idea. Like, I tend to write multiple projects at once. And so I'm often working on a short story collection, a novel, poems, some essays, like all kind of moving all together. I don't ever get what they call writer's block because if I get bored or I feel blocked, I just go to another project. So it's kind of hard to know how, like, what was the early seed, because it turns out that this book actually may have taken me longer than any of my other books have taken me, which I didn't realize that until somebody told me, you know, I heard you read from a section that is called Belly of the Whale here. She said, I heard you read from a very early, she's like, it's a little different now, but I heard you read from that maybe 14 years ago. And I was like, wait, what? I was writing this 14 years ago. And so it made me realize that I've been actually working on it for such a long time. And that maybe Belly in the Whale, as far as I can tell, is one of the earliest parts of the novel. And Belly of the Whale is from the perspective of a character named Stella. And Stella is one half of the lovers that make up the two intimacies and histories that meet at the center of the book. So I think it's possible that I started with Stella, a coming of age story. Some of the details in there are details that are very familiar to me. A character jumps off a cliff into the ocean, something that I did all my teenagehood myself. And I probably wanted to, you know, concretize it in a novel for a long time. So I imagine that was an early part of the book, which means that a lot of this stuff about water and the sea were always really like critical to the novel.
Oh, that's incredible. Oh my gosh. So you just totally pulled an inception on yourself. You were writing this book without even realizing you were writing it 14 years. That's incredible. That's amazing. But also kind of terrifying. The writer's mind is so mysterious. So then if water and the Stella parts were always sort of there, then I wonder about the fly section. So like those sections which deal, which are more landlocked, we might we might say, were those also, did those also have like early antecedents in the project, or did they sort of come in after you'd already sort of cut away parts of the story?
So I live in Atlanta, and
Mhm.
Fly was born, lives, and goes his whole young adulthood in Atlanta. He goes to college even in Atlanta. And so it would be logical that I probably wrote that section after I moved to Atlanta. I've been in Atlanta just about 3 years, 3 years now. But I wrote all of that section before I even knew I was going to be a professor at Emory. Like, I think I did another sort of magical thing to myself where I came to Atlanta a couple of times to do research for the Fly section. I went to where he was from. I had to see the college that I was going to have him go to, where he has his first job, downtown Decatur. I had to kind of go into the landscape there. So I think I kind of like called Emory and Atlanta into being for myself. But one of the earliest parts of the Fly section was actually not even his Atlanta section. It was a section where he's a young man and he is learning to play marbles. At least he thinks he's learning to play marbles for the first time with his cousin and his grandparents. And they're in Memphis. So he's learning to play marbles in Memphis. And that story was really inspired very early on by this idea of shock rock. Do you know this kind of music?
No.
There's a type of music called shock rock that it's like, the rockers that we see who have like I don't know, like Maiden, or have their face painted and
Mhm.
that's shock rock. But
Ah.
as we know about a lot of American music, it began with Black shock rockers. And I was really interested. Like, there's a song called You Put a Spell on Me.
Mhm.
This is a song that many of us know. You put a spell on me and you're mine, or whatever. Or no, it's I put a spell on you, the other way around. I put a spell on you and now you're mine, right? This is a song that's actually been remade a couple of times, but the earliest version is a really weird shock rock version by a Black shock rocker. And I was interested in that. I thought I was really curious. So the pastor that Fly meets while playing marbles is a kind of shock rocker pastor. And he's just interesting to me because I was just interested in how so much of what we understand to be American is music, but also is Black.
Mhm.
Like, you dig enough, it turns out that there's like Blackness at the root of it. So I was interested in that, and I wanted to tease that out in fiction, as fiction writers do.
Yeah, totally. No, but you're also like totally right. I mean, I remember I grew up in Alabama. I remember being teased for liking country music. And I was like, but like, why are you teasing me? They sound just like Black people. That's just gospel. Like, that's just I mean, it is kind of incredible, the PR operation that has like turned the blackest of Black forms into these allegedly white art forms.
Yeah.
But that is a conversation for a different day, I guess. I guess then like maybe it is sort of germane to my next question, which is, one of the book's main themes is inheritance, like the different things that get inherited, like the ways that we love each other and are loved, for example. Also, things like mental illness, things like spiritual hunger and a desire for meaning and stuff like that. And also trauma and pain, all these different things that we inherit within our families. Was like inheritance always like a real operating theme for the pieces as they came together, or did that or was that another one of those things that just sort of surprised you when you had sort of aligned it all at the end?
No, this thing was very intentional. Having this, what I might call like history of intimacies, the whole concept that even the things that we think of as most private, just about me as an individual, like this is mine and mine alone. All of those things, the argument I want the book to make, the intellectual argument I want the book to make, is that that's sort of bullshit, that actually we are never alone. And that, you know, a lot of the things that we think of as private are actually very social. A lot of the things that we think of as intimate and particular to us are political and historical. And I am hoping that the reader goes away with a feeling that even something like who you fall in love with is a social, political, historical act, that it's not yours alone, that it has come to you from the generations. And there's history there, there's trauma there, but there's also a lot of beauty there too. So I'm hoping that that's what the reader experiences, but that was always the project, to think through like, what does it mean to really love a person, to not only choose it, but that even that feeling of like falling in love, that feels like it's an out of control feeling that has nothing even to do with us. It's from God. Yes, it is from God. It is from you, but it's also from your mama. and, and like the books that you read as a child, and from the TV shows that you watched. It's from all of the influences. Like we're not really actually individuals. I mean, we are, but we are more of a community than anything else.
Totally. I mean, it's all so contextual. And that does to me feel like one of the big kind of, some of the most beautiful moments in the book are when characters have that moment where they're like, oh, wait, this was always going to happen because of X and Y and Z. And there are moments where characters do feel overwhelmed by it. Like in I think it's the first section where Fly's grandfather, or is it his father that we first meet in the
You meet his father, Gary.
We meet his father. You know, like that is a character who is so like burdened by, you know, a lot of personal demons and personal issues, but so much of what makes that first marriage fraught has to do with the inherited legacies of race in America, right? Like, and it's that relationship can't survive the sort of tensions of the outside world pulling on you. And so there are all these like gorgeous moments of like a person who wants and loves and is so full of love, but like can't have the person they love most because of everyone else's inherited ideas of what love is and what it looks like, and the way that that gets handed down to Fly. You know, I mean, it's just so, I mean, the book is like full of these like gorgeous moments of the ways that our love is shaped and pushed and pulled on, both within our families and by other people's inherited ideas of love.
Yeah, no, facts. Yeah, we are social beings, absolutely. And a lot of stuff, you know, sometimes we get stories and inheritances that we don't even know we're getting. You know, there's all this evidence in science now, of course, that, you know, you're carrying around trauma in your DNA from your grandparents that you had no idea. Like, you had no idea that like your family's survived like the potato famine in Ireland. And then, but in your DNA, the DNA of a person who survived a famine, even though you've always lived in relative like luxury or stability. So it turns out that even things that we don't even know about are inside of us and are causing us to operate in certain kinds of ways. So in the novel, like there are some stories that characters are not telling each other. Like there's Fly's mom, different than Fly's dad. Fly's mom has been lying to her son for his whole life. And she starts off by lying to us too. And then eventually reveals sort of indirectly that she's not actually been telling the truth, but Fly lives with that lie. He lives with this thing that he doesn't even know that he's living with, which is another reality, I think, of being human right now, always.
I mean, totally. I mean, and yeah, I mean, I, former scientist here, I mean, it is true. I mean, I worked in nematodes, and if you starved a plate of nematodes, you could see changes in the genetic expression 10 generations down the line. Like, you know, I mean, the inherited traumas and but I also feel like that is just like so deeply human. Also, this idea that like, and we think about the genes, but I think what your book so beautifully demonstrates is that you do this great job of like tracing the psychological and emotional consequences of the various wounds that like people within your family have, you know, and like Fly's mom is the way she is because of the way her parents were. And you know, it affects Fly, like fucks him up and like a real in like a real palpable way. And there are things that he is on the lookout for and knows to be on the lookout for, like his dad's schizophrenia. But then there's also those quiet lesions in his heart, like that he doesn't know to be on the lookout for because nobody talks about it. So, I mean, in the book, it just shows it so beautifully. It's just, oh my gosh, I have no idea how you did it, but I was in awe of it because.
Thank you for saying that, Brennan. I mean, as I revealed, it took me a long ass time. So
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the book is also really wise on this other thing, the ways in which, like, particularly sometimes like Black Southern families have these whole areas of life that we just do not talk about. Like, we just do not and cannot talk about. And it's so difficult to illustrate that in fiction because, you know, fiction is all about what you can show and what you can prove and stuff like that. And it really takes like a patient storyteller to unfold like the real consequences of those silences.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think that what you're saying is also true for Caribbean families too. And the book traces African Americans, like a Southern African American family, which is like a Black family from the Caribbean. So different kinds of Blacknesses, different kinds of American Blacknesses in particular, because Stella is from the Virgin Islands, like I am, and the Virgin Islands is part of the United States, although many people don't think of it that way. I mean, even sometimes Virgin Islanders, we don't always think of it that way. We don't always think of ourselves as American, but we are. And in fact, it's something that I had to think about too, as I realized I've been living most of my adulthood here in the continent. I carry an American passport. I have a lot of the privileges of an American, but I grew up in a place that is outside of the continent, right? So I grew up in the Caribbean and was surrounded by Caribbean people and understood myself to be a Caribbean person. Like, what does it mean to be both Caribbean and American by birth at the same? That's such a strange thing, like not Caribbean hyphen American, but some sort of like Caribbean and American, like this other thing that maybe only Puerto Ricans have in common with us. So I know that Caribbean people often arrive in America and feel anxiety about their African Americanness. And I also know that within Black communities in America that African Americans and Caribbeans sometimes are at conflict with each other. And so I really wanted to think through that. Like, what would it mean if these two histories are convergent in love? What would that mean? And, you know, I do want to make sure that our audience knows that the book is, I mean, it's a book that really does explore family traumas, but it's really a book about love and about joy and about beauty. And I really wanted to make sure, one of the things I was writing against in the book was the idea that if you write about people of color, and there are people, you know, there are Latinx people, there are also white characters, that when we write about people of color, period, that doesn't mean that we have to center trauma as their primary experience with their humanity. Because I actually think our primary experience with humanity, all of us humans, is love. And I wanted to give that to all my characters, my brown and Black characters, most specifically.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd ever read a book that had so many different kinds of love in it. Like, that was like specifically about, you know, black character. Like, there was so much love on every single page, so much humor and so much wit and life, but like it did feel like a rigorous intellectual and creative exploration of like, what is love and what does it look like and how do we inherit it and stuff like that. And it was like quite fascinating. I guess my next question is, it has to do with the setting. So like, there are so many different settings in the book. You know, we have the South, we have like the sort of deep South, we have we have Memphis, we have the East Coast, we have the West Coast, we have the Caribbean. There's so many different, we also have continental Africa. Like there's so many like alive, urgent settings in the book. And each setting isn't just like a backdrop, like it's doing real sort of real narrative and thematic work. And I guess I wonder a little bit about like one, like what felt like, how do you approach setting in your writing? Like how do you make it like an alive thing? And two, like did you know from the outset that you would be going to all of these places narratively? And if not, like how did were you terrified when you realized the sort of scale of what you were gonna have to handle?
I do think that if you're going to write well, you have to write bravely. I mean, I just 100% believe that. If it ever feels easy, emotionally easy, like intellectually easy, then like what the hell are you up to? Like what's the point? I think if it's not pushing you, then it's probably not going to push the reader. And ultimately, you know, we write also to do good work in our own spirits and souls. So I do think that if the work doesn't scare me a lot, then I'm not doing anything. So I'm always trying to get to those places where I feel fearful and then make myself brave. Um, I, this book is always has also always been about the environment. I'm really interested in the natural environment. I secretly think of myself as an environmental writer. I teach environmental literature sometimes at Emory. So I'm really interested in the natural environment actually, and its important role in creating the humans who live inside of that environment. And that as a fiction writer, someone who teaches craft at the college level, but also someone who teaches craft, like I teach classes all over the world and especially in the US. And I was a student. One of the things that people often don't think about is how to build character based on the space that your character is inside of. Like we think about our characters' personal histories as the primary way to build character. That's how most of us have been taught. And we might even believe that like you are what happened to you when you were 10. And I just think that's only like a part of who you are. I think like you are also what happened to your dad when you were 10. We talked about that, right? But I think you're also what happens in the space that you're in and like the kind of air that you breathe and the way the sun fell on you your whole life. And if there was sea or mountain nearby, I think that impacts you as much as what happened to you when you were 10. So the novel actually begins with a map. I don't know if you guys can see that so well in the Zoom, but there's a map at the opening. And big up to my awesome team at Riverhead who helped me with the map. Some of them were in the audience. Woo-hoo, Riverhead. My publisher is so supportive of me. And like they indulge me with all my whimsical stuff that I want to do. But one of the things that that I have in the map is I have like little notes about all the different locations that the characters have been to. And I really want the reader to see the map and like understand that this is a novel that's going to take us around the United States. And I label the map of an American love story because I want the reader to know that like I'm signposting it for you. You know, like this is going to be about what it means to be American and what it means to be in love as an American, you know, in our current historical moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I want to ask a little bit about character. So like this book, it's very, I mean, it's not a long book by any stretch of the imagination, but like there are so many characters in this book. And I loved all of them, but some of them we only meet for a very short period of time. Some of them come back, some of them haunt, you know, some of them are have a ghostly presence throughout the book. But I guess I wonder, like, how do you, so we've talked a little bit about how you approach character, but like, how do you approach like building out these ensemble of characters? And how do you build these characters such that they linger in the mind even after we leave them? Like the preacher haunts me to this day. Like what a terrifying, truly a terrifying entity that you've created, singular in American literature. So I guess like, could you tell us a little bit about building out ensemble characters, using them in fiction, because there are some drawbacks and some real difficult technical challenges to that.
Yeah, so another thing that I resist is the idea that anybody is really secondary in a text. Like
Mm,
I mean, I don't believe that about real life. I don't think anybody is secondary. And so as a fiction writer, I want to be who I really am in the world in my process too. And I just don't believe that anybody really needs to be secondary. Some people, I am focusing on them and they're the what we call main character of the story or the book. But I really think that even people who may have small space in the work should be fully alive and present when you meet them. Like nobody is expendable. Like in real life, nobody's expendable, and in my books, nobody's expendable. So I just really believe in crafting them as lushly and carefully as possible. I'm a very careful writer, but I'm also a writer who wants to think about people's bodies. Like bodies are important to me. Like the sensuality of my characters are important to me. What they sound like is important to me. And you know, where their places in history, like how they interact with the space, all of that is really key to me. So I think, I mean, I'm sort of taking the compliment, but I think that the way that I do it is by really honoring every person that enters my frame,
mm.
and making them, you know, giving them their full human due. What's really cool about the audiobook of Monster in the Middle is that I mean, I'm reading part of the audiobook, but there are 3 other actors that read other major characters. In the beginning of the novel opens with this map, but then the first time we see text, it opens with this this love letter. I don't know if you guys could see that. And the love letter is written from the parents. And the way that the audiobook people designed it, which is so cool, the different readers of the novel like read a different line
Oh,
of the
wow.
letter, which is actually how I designed it in the writing. Like the love letter is one of the last things that I wrote after having written the whole book, after having thought through everybody's voice and everybody's tonality, everybody's like syntax in the way that they talk, making sure that their syntax was very particular to that character. Like nobody sounds alike in the book. So that even the love letter, it's kind of jarring because on purpose, because every line is a different syntax, because it's a different character actually. And in the audiobook, that's really obvious because you hear the different actors. And in fact, I should big up Oceana James, who's I just saw is in the audience here today, because she read one of the most important characters in the book. What's really funny too is Oceana and so and Eva Asantaway have been like bigging each other up throughout the whole Zoom. I noticed, like Caribbean women be doing. And yeah, I want to just say that Oceana did an amazing job, and it was really my pleasure to have a Virgin Islander read the Virgin Islands parts of the book, which is kind of new because even in my previous book, I hadn't thought to sort of flex that power muscle and ask, hey, can we have a Virgin Islander? My previous audiobook won prizes for the excellent audio. So they did an amazing job. But I'm so happy with this one because it also features some Virgin Islands actors, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like it further extends what you were just talking about, that the sort of extension of being who you are in the world and your process and your art, and sort of bringing that extra bit of love to it and getting someone from the, I mean, it's incredible. I'm all weepy about it. It's so beautiful. I guess, I mean, that is just like really extraordinary. It's so extraordinary. I'm gonna have to go listen to that because I want it. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I really recommend the audiobook. I mean, I hope people buy the book itself. I think it's a really beautiful object. I think the designers did an amazing job. It's sort of monstrous in the Frankenstein-ness, which is also like metaphoric to the book of how different things have come together to make the love. So I love the object of the book, but the audiobook is going to be super dope because the voices are just so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I'm very excited about that. I guess before we get into the thick of audience questions, I'd like to talk a little bit about the form of the book, because as we've alluded to it, it's sort of, I mean, it's a novel that tells broadly like the story of a love via a history of like family intimacies on two lines. And it's sort of broken into these like chapters or little stories. And I guess I wonder, like, how did you arrive at that structure? Like, it's a novel in stories in a way, some of which are linked quite narratively, and others are, it's more fluid. I guess, like, could you talk a little bit about putting it together? Because I mean, it works beautifully, but I'm like, how did you decide the order? How did you write these? It's so
I love that you keep being like, how did you do this? You're flattering me. I thank you so
well, I
much.
mean, I'm so, whenever I see something like that, because I'm unable to do it, I'm just like, how does a person's mind even know how to how to make this happen?
So I wrote a collection of stories called How to Escape from a Leper Colony. I wrote
Mm,
traditional novel. Traditional might be the wrong word because I don't think much of what I do is traditional, but it's called Land of Love and Drowning. Um, and I wrote a book of poems called Wife. And then because I am invested in trying to throw myself into danger as an artist, I thought, well, what have I not done? And I haven't done a novel and story. So there was some of that impulse to like try
mm,
something new as a crafts person. Um, and trying to do it well and beautifully, which is always so important to me. Like I want to make you fall in love. I want to make you swoon. And so not just doing it for the fun, but doing it like at an expert level if I can. So part of it was that impulse. The other thing is that I'm a mom, and it turns out that this form, the novel and stories, although it maybe wasn't always called that, is a form that is really has really been taken up by women historically. And I think that's because you can write it in small chunks. You can like you can make sort of solitary and whole this one chapter. You can tie it up neat. You can even send it out and get it published, and you can get paid for just that story. And then you can, a couple years later, write the next chapter, and then you can package it, get paid, send it off. And so you're able to sustain yourself and keep yourself present as a writer in the world in these sort of small spaces
mm,
while you're also like raising children, taking care maybe of a husband or a wife yourself, maybe taking care of your parents, especially if you are a writer of color. If you're a woman writer of color, you're probably doing all those three things at the same time. Which is also to say that we have in our current world, we have had at least two that I know of, novels and stories that have gotten a lot of attention, both by women. Visit from the Goon Squad was one, and Olive Kittredge was another. I think those both won the Pulitzer.
mm,
Um, but I think it might be important to note that those were also, like, one, they're by women. So I think there's something about this form that is very gendered. But two, the award-winning ones were by white women. And I think the truth of the form is that it's also a form that brown and black women have been using for a long time. And that those writers or those books don't tend to get attention until, professors or teachers have taken up the mantle maybe 5-10 years after they've been published. So they don't tend to get a lot of attention like right when they're published, right? And I think that's also racialized. So it's
mm.
like, oh, we like this cute form when the white ladies do it, but we're like, what the fuck are the black girls doing? Like, what is that the Latinx woman is up to? Is it really a novel? It's a bit jarring or whatever. Like we have all these critiques about the form. It seems to me when we read it in Women of Brewster Place, or How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent, or Clear of the Sea Light, all by writers, all those books that are now canonical in some ways, but did not get a lot of attention when they first came out. And I think that's, racialized. But I think the form overall is gendered in part because it allows you to still have your complex life, which is the truth for, I think, a lot of, adult women, especially women of color.
Totally. Oh my gosh. What a brilliant. I could ask you a million follow-up questions about that because it is so, I mean, it is like so true because like when you go back and like look at what Black women have been writing over the last 50 years, like these incredibly intricate constellations of
Yeah,
stories.
Yagasi, Homegoing. I mean,
Ye-
so many of these books, you know,
Ayanna Mathis.
Diana Mathis, even Jamaica Kincaid's Annie John, that's a novel in stories. Like those things are not connected in any, those chapters are individual chapters. So it just seems to me the individual stories there. So it just seems to me that a lot of those writers aren't getting attention until deeper into their careers, because it takes a while for, you know, the powers that be, the gatekeepers, to kind of see, oh, this is what the people are up to. And usually it's, I think, you know, academics or high school teachers that pick up this stuff and then they become canonical that way.
Yeah.
But they're not becoming canonical in the way that, you know, Elizabeth Strout's work, who I adore, and was her novel was very important to this novel. Or Visit from the Goon Squad, which is also an important influence on this novel. And yet I think, you know, when it's a white writer doing it, it's given a little bit more attention, and even maybe giving the quirks of it or giving a pass.
Totally. And when it's a Black woman, especially, they don't stop to ask, like, what are the merits of this? Like, what were the consequences of this intentional aesthetic choice that was made for this art to tell this story in this way? Instead, it's like, oh, they couldn't write a real novel or whatever.
Yeah, and you know, for this book, I don't know how nerdy our audience is, and I get kind of nerdy about the craft thing. I know people are just like, just tell us about the characters, and it's so beautiful, and it is. I hope you really feel that this is a beautiful novel that will make you laugh, cry, and want to fuck your partner. Like I do think it will do all those things for you. At the same time, like every chapter of the novel is written in a different form of fiction. I thought to myself, I'm going to write a novel in stories, I want to do that with deep intentionality, so that there's a different kind of voice in every section, but there's also a different form in every section. So we have a letter, we have something that's written like in a sestina form. You know, we have things in first person, third person, omniscient. We have things in all different kinds of in structures, and that was a really important choice for me as well.
Yeah, and it like sometimes like that sort of gimmickry or like that kind of technical diversity can seem like the writer showing off, but here it like just like deepens everything. Like it just feels like such a deep part of the aesthetic project of the book, which is all these how many people does it take to make a love? And it's a lot. You know, it's a lot. Okay, now I'm gonna stop being so selfish and let the audience in. Here we have a question. So thankful to be here. I wonder if while putting this book together, did you wonder or consider the changing ways novels as text are received? Curious if you've given thought to expanding ways of presenting the novel as text.
Yes, I mean, in some ways, the delight of writing a novel in stories was that, I mean, I don't know if my publisher would want me to say this, but much of the novel existed in the world before it existed in this one package. So that meant that things that you know, like it might, like I have early things that were published in the Boston Review, that were published here, you know, all over the place. Some things that were published in very tiny places, that are places like the Caribbean Writer or the Journal of West Indian Literature that only Caribbean people are reading. Some things published in like Black literary journals. Some things published in like places like, you know, the New Yorker. So that really allowed me to have different audiences, like very carefully thought through audiences. Like, you know, I published something in New Yorker, but I also chose to publish something in the Caribbean Writer, which, you know, nobody's reading outside of the region really. So that was, it allowed me to be to sort of present my own multiplicity and present the novel's multiplicity. So I do think about it in that way. And in some ways, that's kind of how novels used to be. You know, I don't know if you remember, like in like the middle of the last century, you would kind of serialize a novel. You would get it like sometimes on the radio or sometimes in the New Yorker. It would just be serial. and you get it bit by bit. So in a way, like that's another way to present the novel. And I was kind of able to get a version of that, but like a multiracial version of it, which was exciting.
Multiracial serialized fiction. It's the future. I love that. That's incredible. Second question here. Now that you're moving toward working on your 5th book, I wonder if you can speak to how your concept of your body of work has changed. What do you feel remains to be done that will push you to be brave and groundbreaking and further explore your obsessions?
I had to look and see who are asking these hard ass questions.
Get them, Tiffany, get them.
I love it. I mean, they're great questions. So I'm a professor, and one of the things that professors have to do is like constantly think through like what we're up to in our, what academia calls scholarship, but as fiction writers, we just call our work. And so early on in my writing life, I had to really think about like, what am I doing? Like, who am I as a writer? And I mean, I think I've told this story before, and so I'll be super short in saying it, but when I was about 14 years old, my, I was living in the Virgin Islands, and I remember I was looking for some poems that I had written, that I had typed at school, because we didn't have computers, at least I didn't have access to one. And I knew I had left them in my room somewhere. And my grandmother, who I live with, had told me, like, look in those boxes up there. And so I looked in these boxes where I thought she put them away, and I found these poems that I hadn't remembered ever writing. And in the same box was a picture of me in a white confirmation dress. My family is Catholic, but I hadn't remembered wearing that dress. I hadn't even been confirmed yet at that point. So I asked my grandmother, like, what the hell is this? And she said, oh, that's not you, that's your mother. Those poems aren't yours, they're your mother's poems. And it was the first time I realized that I was actually living in the room that my mother had lived in. And, I always knew that my grandmother who was raising me had raised her, but I hadn't realized how much I was actually like living sort of Russian doll style in my mother's wake, And so I think for me, even when I thought I was taking on an individual dream, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be the writer of the family, it was just never really true, right? It was never just me. It was my mother. And it actually was even my grandmother, because my grandmother was a librarian and told stories to the kids in the library for a living. So it was never my dream alone. And I think that concept is always part of my work, that like who I belong to, where I belong, like the tension between individuality and community, whether the community is a marriage, a love affair, a family, a region, a nation, or it's the solitary self. That's always what I'm interested in thinking about. And I think that's going to be always what I'm up to. Now, a challenge for me might be to actually do what we think of as traditional and like focus on the individual. What might it mean to like think through individuality? Since I'm always thinking through the tension between the individual and the community, what might it be to sort of focus on the individual? My next project is I think we shall see, because I'm always working on many projects, but I think the next one that's closest to finished is a book of essays on joy. It's a book of essays on living a glorious, wonderful, happy life, especially as a Black or brown person.
Oh my gosh, sign me up immediately. I mean, that's gonna be so good. Did you have, and this is from Monica Boyer, did you have a playlist that accompanied your writing of this novel? And if so, will you share it with us?
Yeah, I mean, the novel has so many references to music because Fly, one of the main characters. See, I never even have one main character, because I'm like, what's a main character? Everybody is main character. Fly is a musician, and he begins his musical life in his own home because his father and mother kind of use music to compete with each other throughout their marriage. And so he becomes someone who's really invested in music and becomes a musician himself. So I listened to a lot of music as research for Fly, and And a lot of that music was for me actually like playing as I was writing different sections. So early on, like Lionel Richie plays on the radio in one of the early sections. So like that's really important. Soul to Soul is playing somewhere else. There's a lot of gospel, especially like real down home church, Michaela Jackson type gospel. Somebody actually sings in the book. There's a lot of sort of Afro pop and like different kinds of music that Stella finds out about when she goes to West Africa. So music is huge in the book, actually. So those are just a few, but then there's also like this, as I told you, like shock rock, like way old school shock rock. That stuff was really important. And I played it out loud while I was working. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, music is all over this book. I mean, it is in some ways like music is like a fourth main theme of the book in many ways.
Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. I think there's maybe like 10 main themes.
Yeah, well, I feel like, and probably 20 sub-themes. I mean, it's just one of those books that just like is so rich and is so moving and so beautiful. And is so wise on so much of what it means to be alive today. Endless rereading potential for sure. Okay.
I think somebody asked me if I can write and listen to music at the same time. Is that an actual question, Melanie? Yeah, of course. Definitely. I listen to music while I'm, especially when I'm germinating like original stuff. I'll use music to help inspire me. I'll sometimes also read. So like literature, like metatextually, the book is also about books and stories. So Monster in the Middle, like even begins with like not in actual context in the novel, but sort of like another ghost in the novel is like the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, and how Theseus has to enter into the labyrinth to kill the Minotaur and save his people and save himself too. How saving himself and saving his people is the same thing. But you know, Ralph Ellison is a big influence, in especially for Fly's character. Jamaica Kincaid is a huge influence for Stella. Garcia Marquez, who's always everywhere in my work, is a huge influence. I even have a section that's like uses the lines from his one of his novels, and has that section inspired by his novel. So like books are also really important things. So I often read before I start writing as a way to get me like, who do I want to talk to? I want to talk to Jamaica Kincaid. So let me read her stuff, and then I can say some things in return. I can be in conversation with her.
Oh, that's incredible. I'm with you on the music. I can't, I read after I write. It's still just gotta ease out of my terrible words and into some good words, but I can't read before. Otherwise, I'm just copying. It's just too porous.
That's really cute.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have. We have 4 minutes before. So is there any last scramble, last thoughts, Tiffany, last thoughts, audience? Anyone have any last final thoughts before we all must depart to the ether? I just want to say that like when Riverhead sent me this galley, I had just had like a very, very long, very difficult year, and I found it really hard to even just like read. Like it was so hard to read, and this book was just such a warm welcome back to being able to read books. And it was one of the first books I read to get back into things, and it was just such a delight. It was so delightful, and it really filled me up. So I'm just really grateful for it.
That's like the most important compliment I've gotten about the book, I think, ever. I mean, if a book, I mean, isn't that what literature should do? I mean, like bring you back into humanity, and like, oh, I'm so glad. It gives me such pleasure to know that the book, I'm like, okay, done, book launch over. That
I
was
mean,
the whole goal. I mean,
yeah,
really, the whole goal of Monster in the Middle is to like let people know, like, you're okay. Like, you are not alone. Like, life actually, in all its bullshit, is actually beautiful.
mm.
And like, welcome to it. So I'm like, I feel like I reached my target audience.
Oh, I mean, it was such a thrill. I mean, it really just, oh, it was thrilling. It was moving. It was beautiful. It was so much fun. It made me think. It was just, yeah, it was good food after a very long year.
I'm so glad, Brandon. Thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah,
Of
thank you.
course.
Wow. Thank you both so much. I know my heart is full. I think everybody else's hearts are full now too. What a joy. Congratulations, Tiphanie. I hope you have a fantastic trip to the Virgin Islands with your kids and all the book talks that you're going to do. Thank you so much for joining us. Brandon, you guys are the dynamic duo. You're welcome to our stage, virtual or real, anytime. So
Maybe
please,
paperback. We'll do it again.
that's right. That's right. And thanks to our audience for joining us. And we'll see you all soon. And Monster in the Middle, make sure you buy it from our bookstore and read it and buy it for all of your friends for the holidays. And also people you don't like, just buy lots and lots of copies.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you guys all for coming and for sticking around.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.